The music was the last memory, then the roar of the wave. I woke up, choking on sand. Salt burned my throat. A headache pounded against my skull. My arms trembled as I tried to push myself up. The world around me was wreckage. Our yacht, torn to pieces. Shattered glass glittered like deadly jewels. And then I saw them, all 30 girls. Drenched and pale, scattered on the beach like broken dolls. They'd been tossed ashore by a merciless sea. 30 girls, my entire class, and me, the outsider. After 4 years of being invisible, we were all stranded here together, equals in our desperation, equally lost. I sat up, a fresh wave of pain hitting my temple. That's when it appeared. Not with my eyes, but in my mind. A projection. A transparent screen hovered in my vision, like an interface installed directly into my brain. Survival system activated. Scanning environment. Island biome detected. Initiating survival guidance protocol. I blinked. The text remained. I blinked again. It was real. I looked from the wreckage to the tree line 50 meters away, to my dazed classmates. Then back to the screen. A menu had appeared. The tabs were simple. Crafting, water, shelter, food, navigation, flora and fauna. I focused my thoughts on the crafting tab. Somehow, my mind just knew how to use it. A list of recipes instantly populated the screen. Each recipe listed materials. As I looked toward the jungle, certain plants began to glow with a faint aura. Bamboo stalks, a patch of dry bark near a fallen palm, stones by the water. This wasn't a game. No points, no experience bars, no leveling up. It was a hyper-specific survival guide for this exact island, using everything physically around me. I forced myself to my feet. Hey! My voice came out as a harsh rasp. Listen. Cheyenne looked up first. Of course, it was her, the class president, always in control. She had a reflex for assessing any speaker to judge if they were worth her time. You're awake, she said, her voice flat. I need to tell everyone something. I kept my tone level. When I woke up, a system appeared. An interface. It's telling me how to survive here. A system? She repeated. Yes. Her gaze was sharp, analytical. She shot a look at Minji next to her. A silent, dismissive message passed between them. You must have hit your head, someone muttered from my left. A bad one, by the looks of it, another added. I didn't. I tried again. Look, the interface is highlighting materials we can use. Bamboo over there, dry bark by that palm, and those gray stones at the waterline. We can have clean water in 2 hours, a fire in 20 minutes, if we start right now. Clean water? Cheyenne stood up slowly, her voice dripping with condescension. The patient tone you'd use for a child. From a magic computer inside your head? It's not magic. But she had already turned away. We need to find people, she announced to the group, ignoring me. There could be a village on the other side. A research station. Maybe someone with a radio. We need to move. The island could be 15 kilometers around, I argued. We don't know the terrain. We have no water. Some of you are already hurt. Walking into that jungle is... We'll be fine, she cut in. She shouldered a salvaged bag and looked at the others. Who's with me? 26 of them stood without hesitation. I watched them file past, most refusing to meet my eyes. Some gave me the look you reserve for a crazy person talking to himself. The last 4 hesitated. Yunji, Heiran, So-yeon, and the quiet girl, Ji-won. They looked at me, then at the retreating group, and then they followed. I was alone. The system's prompt pulsed gently in my vision, waiting. I stared at it for a moment. Then I turned to the glowing materials and picked up a flat stone from the water's edge. Fine. The system's first instruction was clear. Build a fire. Water was more urgent, but fire was the first step. I needed charcoal for a water filter, and charcoal needed fust. I had maybe 4 hours before the sun became a real enemy. For 30 girls wandering a jungle they didn't understand. The system marked the bark, and I found it. I split it clean with a sharp piece of wreckage. A metal shard became my knife. The system showed the angle, guiding my every move. Next, the flint stones. Right at the waterline, just as the interface predicted. I followed the system's diagram, striking them over the shavings. Once, twice, 7 times. On the 9th strike, a spark. I gently nurtured the ember. I fed it small twigs, then larger ones. A stable flame finally grew. My hands were cut twice, my knees bruised from the rocks. I stared at the small, controlled flame. Exactly what I needed. Not bad at all. The filter was next. The system's blueprint was simple but elegant. A bamboo stalk, split, and hollowed out. Inside, I layered the materials. Charcoal from my fire, then fine sand, and then coarse sand. A piece of yacht fabric went on top. Pour dirty water in, get clean water out. The bamboo was the real challenge. Splitting it needed the perfect angle and edge. The system showed me how, but for 20 minutes, my hands refused to cooperate. I finally got 2 sections fitted. I earned a third cut and cursed under my breath. But in the end, it worked. I angled the filter by the fire, propped on two Y-shaped branches the system found for me. A hollow rock nearby would serve as a basin. 50 meters north, the system marked a hidden freshwater stream. It was almost invisible to the naked eye. I filled a piece of hull and hauled it back. I poured it in and waited. Clean water dripped out. It worked. I drank. It tasted of nothing. After salt water and a dry mouth, it was the best taste in the world. Building the shelter consumed the afternoon. The system's plan used the yacht's hull as the main wall. It had crashed against some palm trees. With the right angle, that was 3 walls already provided by nature. I gathered driftwood to build a frame. Using rope from the yacht, I lashed the joints together. The system showed me the right knot. I can barely tie my shoes, but with the diagram, my hands just knew what to do. I layered palm fronds for the roof, like scales, to make the rain slide right off. More fronds covered the floor, not soft, but dry. As the sun began to set on the horizon, I had a fire to last the night, a filter providing endless clean water, and a shelter big enough for 15 people. I even set a simple snare on a trail the system marked at the jungle's edge. I finally sat by the fire, observing my work. My hands now had 5 cuts. My shoulders screamed in protest. The back of my neck was sunburned, and I must have walked 8 kilometers collecting everything. I checked the crafting tab for what was next. New blueprints were unlocked, a cooking surface, basic preservation, a fishing trap. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and that's when I heard it. Voices, drifting from the tree line. Exhausted voices. One was on the verge of tears. My eyes snapped open. A stumbling group emerged from the jungle. Cheyenne led them, her usual confidence completely gone. The others followed behind her, sunburned, utterly exhausted. They moved like zombies, running on fumes for hours. Heyran was holding someone up on her left. Minji, the girl who glared at me, clutched her arm. It was clear she was in pain. They froze when they saw the shelter. Then, the fire. Then, the clean water dripping into the rock basin. Silence hung heavy in the air. Then the girl Heyran was helping, whose name I didn't even know, stumbled to the filter and drank right from the source. One by one, they followed her lead. I just stood there and watched. I counted them. All 30 were there. Even Cheyenne went last, drinking without a single glance my way. After she stood, her eyes finally met mine. Her expression was unreadable. There was no apology. I didn't expect one. But her usual sharp arrogance was gone. For now. How? She asked. The system, I replied. The one I mentioned. A heavy silence fell. Show me, Heyran said softly from behind her. The first time she had spoken to me all day. I can't show you the interface, I explained. Only I can see it, but I can tell you what it said, and you can see the results for yourself. Another silence stretched between us. This one was longer. Model. It worked, Yunji said quietly. She sat by the fire, already soaking in its warmth. Her gaze was distant. A simple fact, not a boast. And that was enough. And they stayed. All 30 people gathered by the fire. A tense silence fell, the first since the shore. The jungle's noises pressed in. Somewhere in the dark, my snare was waiting. I opened the system menu, looking ahead. Tomorrow, the real work began. Dawn arrived fast here. No gradual sunrise. One moment, dark. The next, the sun climbed high, building the heat. I was up before most. The snare had caught something. A small creature, somewhere between a rat and a rabbit. Not enough for 30 people. But it was proof. I reset the trap and added 2 more on fresh tracks the system marked. When I returned, 8 or 9 were awake. Heyran was sitting apart from the rest. She watched me, her eyes weighing what she saw. Yunji was near the fire, hands busy, ready to work. So-yeon was awake, her back straight. She scanned the group, already organizing them in her head. I crouched and opened the system menu. We had work to do, so much to do. I voiced the plan not as orders, but as problems needing solutions. No way to store water. No real food supply. No shelter for 30. No way to preserve our catch. The system shows me solutions, I explained, step by step. But I can't build it all alone. So you need us, So-yeon said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she scanned the group, stirring by the fire. I could see her assessing them. Who could work? Who was too shaken? Who needed a task to avoid panic? Fine, she said. Assign the tasks. And with that, So-yeon was in. 1 down. Yunji was even easier. She was already holding a piece of scrap bamboo, studying its grain. I described the system's fish trap design. She listened silently. When I finished, she just said, "Show me the dimensions." So I told her. She began measuring with her hands, no words needed. That was her language. It wasn't about trust, just the work itself. Clean and direct. Heyran, however, convinced herself. She'd been watching the water filter since last night. The steady drip of clean water convinced her. Sometime overnight, skepticism became curiosity. When I said I needed someone to read the jungle, to find materials and map paths, she stood without being asked. I grew up near mountains, she said. I know how land works. Good, I said. You're on reconnaissance. The others who'd returned, exhausted, were ready to work by morning. Not from a change of heart. They were hungry. They were scared. The boy on the beach had fire and clean water. They did not. Pragmatism works faster than any speech, but not for everyone. About 8 of them gathered at the far end of the shelter. Cheyenne was at the center, arms crossed, watching. I knew that look, from 4 years of seeing it. She was deciding if this was beneath her. As So-yeon assigned tasks, Yuna, Cheyenne's friend, cut in. We aren't taking orders from him. So-yeon calmly looked at her. Then don't. Nobody's forcing you. We should make decisions together, as a group, equally. Great idea, I said from across the fire. I kept my voice flat, no emotion. Who's going to find the second water source by noon? 1 filter for 30 people won't be enough. Silence. Who here knows which plants are safe to eat, and which ones are lethal? More silence. Who can build a fish trap before the tide changes? Yuna's jaw tightened. That's not the point. It's exactly the point, I replied. I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to solve problems. The system shows me how. The choice is yours. I turned back to the fire, preparing to cook. The 8 of them stayed put. I didn't look back. By mid-morning, the first one broke. Minji, the girl who stared me down on the beach. She walked to where Yoonji was weaving the trap, and crouched down beside her in silence. Yoonji handed her a bamboo strip. Minji copied the pattern. And that was it. No announcement, no apology. Just hands wanting to be useful. 2 more followed her by noon. Then it was 5. Cheyenne was the last. She spent the morning sitting apart, just watching. I saw it all. 4 years of being a ghost teaches you to observe. She wasn't pouting. She was analyzing. The water system's mechanics. Yoonji's precise crafting movements. She observed Heyran return with plants, then watched me use the system to confirm which were safe to eat. Early that afternoon, she walked to our filter, then refilled the inlet from our water container. She adjusted its angle, making the drip faster. A small change, but she already understood the mechanism. She improved it after just half a day. Not a word was said, not by me, not by her. An hour later, she helped So-yeon with the shelter. She didn't ask me for orders, she asked So-yeon. That was fine. It was better. The group wasn't solely reliant on me anymore. By day 2's end, the 30 shocked individuals were gone. We weren't exactly a team. We were a system with functions. That was a start. That night, by the fire, I opened the system overview. For the first time, I saw the whole picture, instead of just one problem at a time. The island was far larger than I'd thought. The system had been mapping it all day. It tracked Heyran's exploration, filling in the coastline, marking water, and flagging terrain. Most of it was just dense, hot jungle. But in the map's northeast corner, the system had placed a single marker, a red one. I zoomed in close. The system offered no label, just a category, unidentified structure, investigation recommended. I stared at the marker a long moment, then closed the tab. One crisis at a time. Tomorrow's priorities: water, food, and real shelter for all 30. A cooking surface. A fish trap set by sunset. The red marker would have to wait. Day 3 began with a hard truth. 1 filter was not enough. We were 30 people. The bamboo filter I made only produced 3 liters an hour at its best. For 30 people in this heat, the system set the minimum at 2 liters per person, per day. We were producing less than half of what we needed. Sickness was inevitable if we didn't fix this today. I called Heyran over before dawn. The stream you found yesterday. How far? 10 minutes north, along the beach. It widens about 30 meters inland. I opened the system's water tab. The solution was there, waiting. Not a bigger filter, but a better delivery method. A gravity-fed aqueduct. It would run from the stream to the camp, with a filter built right into the flow. Using split bamboo, we would fit them end to end, angled downward the entire way. The water would move itself. At our camp, a 3-stage filter block. A wooden frame, Yoonji could build in 2 hours. Charcoal, sand, then cloth. Continuous clean water, no more hauling. Scout the straightest path, I told Heyran. Marcus every dip. We need a constant downward slope. She departed without a word. She'd become ruthlessly efficient. Ask, and it was done. I'd learned that in just 2 days, more than I had in 4 years as her classmate. I turned to Yoonji, explaining the filter frame. She listened, her eyes narrowed. It was the look she got when she'd already solved the problem I was describing. When I finished, she simply said, "The bamboo joints will leak. I need to seal them." The system already flagged a solution. Pine resin from a tree, Heyran marked. When heated, it flows into gaps and hardens. Heyran will show you the tree, I said. Heat resin from the bark over the fire. Yoonji nodded, then left to find a container. The aqueduct took all morning and every available hand. Soyeon organized a human chain without being told, with groups of 4 spaced along the route. They passed bamboo sections forward, each team managing their segment. Hae-ran walked the line, correcting angles. Yoonji moved between the filter construction and the channel itself, sealing each joint with hot resin. I worked the middle of the line, cutting and fitting the sections across uneven terrain. My hands had gone numb to the cuts. We connected the last joint, and the water began its journey. Slowly at first, then steady. It flowed clean and continuous into our stone basin. The reaction wasn't applause. It was collective, visible relief, the kind that relaxes shoulders and jaws. One problem, solved. Permanently. How much does it produce? Soyeon asked, her eyes on the stream. Enough. We have enough, if the stream lasts. If not, the system has 2 backups inland. This one is the simplest. She glanced at me. The system. You always say that. Never I think or maybe. Because it's not a guess. It's data. From where? She pressed. I wondered the same thing on day 1, but the answer didn't matter for our survival. Honestly, I don't know, but it's never been wrong. She paused, thinking. Then, fair enough. Cooking was our first major problem. We had fire, and we had food from the snares. Fish Yuna and Mina caught with makeshift lines, crabs and shellfish Hana found in tide pools. But we couldn't cook it right. Food on the fire was either burnt outside or raw inside. By day 2, 3 people were already sick. The system's food tab was ready. I gathered Yuna and 2 others who wanted to build. A quiet girl, Gina, with steady hands, and Mina, who became useful once she started cooperating. We're building a kitchen, I announced. Mina stared at the jungle. Here? Here. First, the cooking surface. The system's blueprint needed 3 large, flat stones in a triangle. It would be stable, with airflow for the fire. The type of stone was critical. Some crack from heat. The system highlighted the right kind. Dense, gray slabstone, worn flat by water at the north cliff. Hana led the team. The stones were incredibly heavy. Each took 2 people to haul back. But we set them up, lit a test fire, and placed a slab on top. The result was instant, a perfect cooktop that held heat evenly. Yuna tested the heat with her hand. She adjusted a stone, tested again, and nodded, satisfied. Next, we needed a pot. The system gave 2 options. First, a large clamshell from the tide pools. It could hold liquid and handle direct heat. The second option was a pot made of clay. It would be durable, but needed the right clay and 2 days to dry. We chose the clamshell. Hana found a perfect one at low tide, large, solid, uncracked. Our first real cooked meal. Fish broth. We used water from the channel, 3 fish, and safe wild greens confirmed by the system. A plant Hana had been wary of, now approved. We added salt from a system-marked evaporation pool. We placed it on our new stove, letting it simmer while everyone else worked through the afternoon. When Gina announced it was ready, serving it in bamboo cups, a new kind of silence fell. Not the silence of fear. It was the hush of tasting a warm, real meal after 3 long days. Gina sat a few feet away. I didn't look at her, but I heard her slow, quiet, exhale a breath of pure relief. No one mentioned the system. No one talked about day 1, the beach, or who was right. The food was all that mattered. I opened the next tab. The fish trap was Yuna's masterpiece. The system's design was a classic funnel. A wide mouth, a narrow channel, easy to enter, impossible to escape. The fish swim in and are trapped. It needed long, flexible bamboo strips, split thin and soaked so they wouldn't break. Yuna studied the design all morning. By the time the stove was done, her prototype frame was built. The joints are loose, she muttered, already taking it apart to restart. Her final trap was perfect, tight, and solid. We weighted it with stones, where the stream meets the ocean. We anchored it with a stake in the sand, facing the current. By morning, we'd have a catch. We placed 3 traps before dusk. Mina waited out to set the second one without being told. Waist deep in water, she focused on the angle. Gina held the 3rd trap as I secured it. Our work finally had a rhythm, one we lacked 2 days ago. That night, I surveyed day 3's accomplishments. A constant water channel to camp. A filter that only needed a new cloth each week. A permanent stove. A new clay pot, now drying by the fire for tomorrow. 3 fish traps set. Snares reset on 4 trails. Safe plants identified and their locations mapped. 30 survivors fed, watered, and sheltered. I checked the system map again. That red marker was still there. It was still unclassified. The system updated with just 1 line. No explanation, only a note. Structural remains. A prior settlement. Its age. Unknown. So, we weren't the first. I closed the interface, watching the flames. Tomorrow, the Kazarma, a real shelter, was priority. And the farm needed planting. The seeds Hayron found near the eastern rocks were on a timer, but that marker demanded our attention. The system's red flags were never just warnings. My eyes scanned the tree line. I listened to the jungle's whispers. Something was out there, waiting. Day 4 dawned with a flood of problems. 30 survivors, in a shelter built for 15. 3 girls woke with swollen insect bites. 2 more slept upright against a wall. There was no room. A fish trap was ripped loose overnight, likely by the current. It needed fixing before the tide turned. I didn't record any of it. The system already had. I just stood in the gray dawn reviewing the tasks. Top priority, the Kazarma. A proper one. It had to be big, sturdy, and elevated. I gathered the core team before breakfast to review the system's design. This was far more complex than our previous work. Not a simple lean-to. This required a real frame, with 4 rows of posts, crossbeams connecting them, sleeping platforms elevated 40 centimeters on a grid of sturdy bamboo, a steeply pitched roof for the rain, 3 walls of woven palm, with one side open to the fire. It could shelter all 30 of us, but the price was 2 full days, and every available hand in the camp. I showed the plan to So-Yeon. She studied the diagram in the sand, my sketch of the system's blueprint. She was silent for a moment. Posts first, she decided. We test the ground before we commit the beams. She was right, of course. The system had flagged that exact same risk. The soil by our current shelter was too soft. We had to move the site 12 meters inland. Hayron confirmed harder ground there, with good tree cover. Mark the spots, I told her. 1 meter apart, 4 rows of 8. With a sharpened stick, she walked the grid, marking each spot with the quiet focus of someone who'd found her role. 32 marks formed a rectangle, the foundation of something that would matter. Setting the posts was our hardest labor yet. Each one was hardwood, from a tree Hayron found 60 meters in. It was dense, tough wood that resisted rot. The system had marked that specific tree. Hauling each log took 8 people. We navigated the tangled roots from the tree line to our camp. 4 trips, 32 posts. It took the entire morning. Unprompted, Minji organized the teams. She sorted them by height, ensuring the weight was balanced. I saw it, but said nothing. 3 days ago, she wouldn't budge. Now, she solved problems the system hadn't even flagged. We drove them in with sharpened ends and a heavy stone for a hammer. 2 steadying, 1 striking, switching every 10 minutes. The shock traveled right up your arms, to your teeth. By noon, 20 posts were set. By mid-afternoon, all 32 were done. Yoonji had prepared the crossbeams, cutting and notching the bamboo for a perfect fit. This meant less lashing was needed. She tested the first beam. It fit perfectly, no wobble. She gave it a brief glance, then immediately moved to the next. No celebration, just the next task. Meanwhile, Cheyenne handled the roofing, harvesting and layering palm fronds, just like the system's diagram I'd shown her. She took 3 younger girls and created her own production line. She didn't ask me or So-Yeon. Later, I passed by and heard her patiently explaining the technique to one of them, clear and precise. The same teacher's tone from her past life, but now she was building a shelter, not a social ladder. She never looked up as I passed. I kept moving. By dusk, the frame was done, the crossbeams set and secured. The sleeping grid was laid 40 centimeters high, so solid, 4 people could stand on it at once. The roof was pitched, the 3 walls woven. From the outside, it was nothing special, just poles and leaves in the twilight. But then, Ji-yeon went inside, laid down, and said, "I can sleep here." Something shifted within the camp, not with a bang, but quietly, like a turning tide. This island was no longer a prison. It was becoming a home. Then, the next morning, the barrel appeared. Hayron discovered it during her sweep of the eastern coast. The system had marked debris patterns from our wreck, that salvageable materials may have drifted east. She returned empty-handed, which meant she'd found something too heavy to carry. A sealed metal barrel, she said, wedged in rocks, 400 meters east. It took 3 of them to even budge it. We assembled a team of 6, armed with a bamboo lever. The barrel was ancient, its seams rusted by salt, but the seal was intact. We pried the lid off with a piece of railing, and a dry, earthy smell escaped. It was seeds, packed in cloth parcels, labeled with faded ink. Zucchini, green beans, and spinach. One label was in a language we couldn't read. Hayron guessed Korean, maybe Japanese. Most were too blurred to make out, but the seeds themselves were viable, dry and intact. The system immediately began its scan. A new tab opened. Agriculture, basic cultivation, tropical climate protocols, active. I could only stare at the screen. Someone had packed these so carefully, labeled them, sealed them against the endless moisture. Did they lose them? Or were they taken before they had a chance? "What's the system say?" Hayron asked. Her eyes locked on mine. She could tell I was seeing something. "It says they'll grow," I told her. But the idea of a farm split the camp. That night, I explained the discovery and the system's instructions. Prepare beds. Plant within 48 hours. First yield in 6 to 8 weeks. The group was instantly divided. Half of them fell silent, the kind of quiet that comes when a harsh reality sets in. 6 to 8 weeks wasn't rescue. 6 to 8 weeks meant we were staying. Yunji said it first. We're building a farm? We're not leaving? We're keeping options open, I said. That's not an option. That's admitting we're stuck. The seeds expire in a week, I retorted. If rescue comes tomorrow, we've lost nothing. If not, in 6 weeks, we either have food or we starve. This isn't about staying. It's about not being stupid. Silence descended on the camp. Then So-Yun picked up a seed packet. She studied it for a moment, then set it down decisively. Where do we dig? She asked. That was all it took. The system's farming plan was simple, but it would be grueling work. We needed raised beds, not ground planting. They drain better in the heavy rain and warm faster in the sun. Each bed 30 centimeters high, with bamboo frames. They were filled with topsoil and compost from camp waste, fish bones, plant scraps, and ash. Heyran found the perfect topsoil 40 meters inland, dark and rich. She knew it was good instinctively. The system confirmed her find. It took 4 trips with makeshift carriers to get enough soil for 3 beds. Our compost layer came from things we'd been throwing away. Fish bones and scales, fruit rinds Heyran had foraged, and wood ash from our fires. We layered it all according to the system's diagram. Yunji measured the ratios by eye, and she was nearly perfect. Ji-Yun, it turned out, grew up near Gyeongju. She knew how to space seeds, how deep each type should be planted, and how to mark the rows. She took over the planting from me without a word, her work far more skilled than mine. The system offered no corrections. We planted zucchini in the first bed, green beans in the second, and spinach in the third. Then came the unmarked packets, 3 unknown varieties, in a 4th experimental bed. The system labeled it with cautious optimism, likely viable, genus unidentified. Monitor germination. When the last seed was covered and watered, Ji-Yun pressed her hand flat against the soil for a moment, just a second. Then she stood. 6 weeks, she said, her voice quiet. It wasn't to anyone, maybe just to the earth. That evening, I looked over everything we'd built in 4 days. The shelter stood firm in the shadows of the trees, large enough for everyone, keeping us dry and off the ground. Clean water flowed constantly from the filter. 3 cook fires were active, serving real meals twice a day. Our fish traps provided steady catches. We had snares set on 6 different animal trails. And now the farm. 4 beds, watered, with seeds beginning their silent work. 30 people, finally sleeping with full stomachs. I opened the system map. The red marker was still there, but now a second, fainter marker had appeared on the island's western edge. Not red, but a dull orange. The system's note was brief. Periodic movement detected. Recommend passive monitoring. Periodic movement. That wasn't an animal's pattern. Animals follow seasons and food. This thing moved with its own logic. I gazed at the dark, dense tree line. The jungle sounds were unchanged. Heyran appeared beside me. She developed a habit of doing that, showing up right as I noticed something new, as if she could track my gaze like a trail. You're facing west, she observed quietly. How did you know? I saw movement there this afternoon. While scouting the clay deposit. She paused. I wasn't certain then. But now, I am. What kind of movement? She was silent. The fire behind us crackled, sending sparks into the darkness. People, she said. Part 5. First contact. Day 5 began with a broken fence, not the perimeter we were planning to build. We hadn't even started that yet. What was broken was the bamboo frame around our second farm plot. 2 posts were snapped clean. The soil inside was flattened in 2 places, the seeds disturbed. This wasn't an animal. The pressure marks were wrong, too deliberate. An animal tears and digs for food. This was something that stood there, and then simply left. Footprints, bare, human-sized. Heyran crouched over them for a long, tense moment. Then her eyes met mine. 2 people, lightweight. They lingered here. Watching our camp? I asked. No, the farm. She pointed to the prints. They were facing the plots, not us. I opened the system map. The orange marker on the western edge had shifted overnight. It was closer. The system had updated its intel. Group size, 8 to 15. Status, established presence. Their behavior patterns suggested long-term habitation. This was their island before it ever became ours. I closed the tab, my eyes on the broken frame. Don't tell the others yet, I said quietly to Heyran. She stared at me. Not until we know what we're dealing with, I explained. If we announce this, we'll get panic or aggression. Neither one of those will help us right now. She thought about it. So-Yun needs to know. Yes, and Yunji. Nobody else until tonight. I found So-Yun at the channel, overseeing the morning's water collection. I showed her the prints and relayed the system's data on the marker's movement. She listened without interruption. a sign she knew how serious this was. When I finished, she stayed quiet, watching the water flow through the bamboo. "So, they've been watching us since yesterday," she murmured. "Probably since day one. Our fire would have been a beacon. And they wrecked the farm bed. Disturbed it. They didn't destroy it. If they wanted it gone, they'd have torn the whole thing apart." Her eyes locked with mine. "You think it was a message?" "I think it was a warning, a boundary line." Another silence passed between us. Then, "What does the system advise?" "The system shows me resources, not how to handle people." That surprised her. I could see her mind recalibrating, realizing the system wasn't all-powerful. "So this is on us," she stated flatly. "This one is entirely on us. We spent the morning building the perimeter. We'd planned it since day 3, after an animal got into our food supply, but the footprints made the task urgent, in a completely different way. The system's design was a stockade fence of upright bamboo poles, sharpened at the top and angled outwards. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone, it was a visual statement. This space is ours. Entering is a conscious choice. Yoonji cut and sharpened the poles. Minji and her team moved them into position. So Yeon coordinated the construction, while Cheyenne organized her own team for the eastern wall. I moved between sections, reinforcing weak points the system flagged. The mood was different from our other projects. More focus. Less chatter. By midday, 3 sides were done. But the fourth, the western face, I designed differently. Still a stockade, but with a gap in the center. A gate-sized opening, framed by 2 heavy posts. It wasn't a door, it was an invitation to negotiate, not a wall that forced a fight. Heyran saw it immediately upon her return. "You left it open on purpose. We're not trying to provoke them, they just disturbed 1 row of seeds. They could have burned everything down." I looked at the opening we had made, but they didn't. That has to mean something. Heyran studied the gap. There are 7 of them. I got close enough to count from the ridge. 7 adults, at least 2 look older. Maybe they're the leaders. Their tools are primitive. Spears of roughly shaped stone. She hesitated. One man's hand is infected. I focused on it. The right palm. It's swollen, affecting his grip. I pulled up the system's flora data, checking Heyron's cataloged plants. The system found 2 matches instantly. A broadleaf plant near the eastern rocks. Crushing it creates an antibacterial poultice. It was common, simple to find. A plant that needed no words, no shared language to be understood. "Can you find that plant by nightfall?" I asked. Heyron processed my description of the system's image. She was skilled at this now, turning my words into a mental map. "I know where it grows," she confirmed. They returned that evening, but not with stealth. We heard their deliberate approach first, branches pushed aside, not avoided. It was the sound of an announcement. 4 figures appeared from the western woods, halting 20 meters from our gate. They wore little, just woven fiber and rough leather, barefoot. Their faces bore strange markings. 3 held spears, points down, but the 4th, their leader, was unarmed. Our camp fell silent. Behind me, 30 people froze, all eyes turning as one towards the forest line. I didn't turn. My eyes were locked on the 4 figures by the trees. I gave the order, quiet but firm, nobody move, and not a word. I grabbed the leaves Heyron gathered and walked toward the opening in our fence. Yoonji's tense whisper reached me. "What is he doing? So young." I ignored it, stepping through the gate, stopping 10 meters away. I placed the bundle of leaves on the ground. Then, I stood up straight. My hands remained open and visible. To the right stood the man with the infection. The swelling was obvious, red spreading up his wrist. My gaze met his, then shifted to the leaves, then back. Slow, deliberate. I repeated the gesture. He looked from the leaves to me. The older man spoke. It wasn't a question, more like a judgment. The injured man replied. A brief exchange followed. Then, the injured man moved. He stopped 2 meters from the leaves, crouched. He picked up 1 leaf, turning it over, smelling it. He studied it for a long moment. Then his eyes met mine. He spoke. The words alien, but the meaning was clear. He was asking for trust. I opened my hands again, palms up. It was the only answer I had. He pressed the leaf to his wound. They left, quickly. 5 minutes, maybe less. But in that time, we stood together, between their forest and our fence. No weapons raised, no voices raised, and no violence. They retreated the way they came. Unhurried. There was no show of dominance, no grand exit. They simply vanished. I remained at the gate, watching the silent trees for a while. Finally, I turned. 30 pairs of eyes were fixed on me from inside our walls. Their faces were a mix of fear, curiosity, relief, and anger. In the center, Cheyenne's expression was a mask. So Yeon broke the silence. "How did you know that would work?" "I didn't," I admitted truthfully. But their goal was observation, not attack. Observers seek understanding. So you give them something to understand. Silence fell again. Then Minji asked, "What now?" I glanced at the tree line. The system's orange marker was stationary. It was still, positioned at the western beach, waiting. Or perhaps, processing. We don't know what they see us as, I said. We came with fire, strange tools, and structures beyond their knowledge. We could be traitors, demons, or a plague. They must see we are none of those before they label us a threat. And if they decide we are a threat anyway? The question came from Cheyenne, the first she'd aimed at me in 5 days. I met her gaze. Then this fence will serve its purpose. That night, I watched the system map at the gate, my eyes on that western marker. It remained still for hours. But after midnight, a second orange marker blinked into existence, further south on the coast. Then a third, near the northern ridge. This wasn't just 7 people on a beach. They were forming a perimeter, and we were trapped inside it. I looked back at our camp, the shelter lit from within by firelight, the quiet sound of the water channel, the dark, sleeping farm beds, 30 strangers, now forged into a functioning group. I zoomed the system map out to its maximum view. The red marker in the corner held firm. It remained an unidentified structure, but with a new update. A new line appeared overnight. Access recommended. Priority, elevated. I stared at it for a long time. Tomorrow's tasks were clear. More fencing on the south side, check the fish traps. And Ji-yeon wanted to begin the second planting, and we had to scout the island's northern region. The system has been warning us since day 3. I closed the map, listening to the jungle. To the west, 7 or more people were listening back. Part 6. The fence holds. The island doesn't. Day 7. 1 week down. I tallied the days as the camp awoke. 7 days have passed since the yacht. 7 days since 30 girls left me on the beach, alone with just a system window and a piece of flint. It felt like a month. And also like 3 days. Island time doesn't flow like the real world. It flows with the tides, driven by our needs, not the clock. And the kazarma, our proof of progress, stood solid. 30 people were sleeping dry and sheltered, off the ground. No more insect bites from the damp soil. No one had to sleep sitting up anymore. The building survived 2 nights of heavy storms without moving. Yoonji sealed the roof with resin on day 5. Thanks to her, the inside stayed completely dry. Our water channel flowed perfectly. We had a surplus, so we started storing it in sealed bamboo, a backup supply, in case the stream moves. The system called it a low risk, but we prepare for anything. We were ready. The system estimated 8 days until our crops would first begin to sprout. Every dawn, Ji-yeon inspected the farm beds. She studied the soil with the same focus Hei-ran gives to animal tracks. Nothing showed on the surface, but deep underground, life was stirring. She was sure of it, and her belief was stronger than any doubt. We ran 3 fish traps, rotating them every 2 days. That insight was Hei-ran's, not mine. Our snare network grew to 9 traps on 5 different trails. We were eating 2 meals a day, real food, protein, greens, and sometimes a bigger catch from the snares. The perimeter fence was finally done. 4 sides of a dense stockade. Only the western gate remained open. No more intruders since the leaf incident 3 nights ago. On the system map, the orange markers hadn't moved. They circled the island's western half, never advancing, never retreating, just watching and waiting. 30 people, fed, sheltered, defended. We weren't rescued, but we were alive, and that was step 1. Something unexpected was taking shape. We were no longer 30 individuals just trying to survive a crisis. We were becoming something that resembled a community. Not a peaceful one, but a community nonetheless. There was still tension. Yuna would still make comments, reminding us of the old social order from school. Who was popular, who was invisible, who just counted the days. And Cheyenne. She still hadn't tried to make peace. And I hadn't pushed her. The debts from those 4 years don't vanish so easily. But our shared labor built bonds faster than words ever could. Carry a post for 200 meters in 35-degree heat, and you forget all about cafeteria politics. When their work keeps you dry during a storm, the past matters less than their present skill. Yoonji had naturally become the camp's master craftswoman. No one appointed her. Everyone just learned it was useless to build anything without her guidance. She had a special connection with materials. The bamboo seemed to speak a different language just for her. Hei-ran became our scout and intelligence officer. Her confidence in the jungle grew stronger by the day. She combined the system's data with her own instincts, creating something far superior. She'd return with intel the system overlooked. Subtle signs, shifts in sound, the specific kind of quiet that means a large predator is close. So-yeon managed internal camp logistics with an almost aggressive competence. Schedules, resources, disputes. She handled it all. In 7 days, she'd shut down 3 arguments before they could escalate. Each time, her method was brutally efficient, direct, fair, and final. Over in 2 minutes. Min-ji, though, surprised me most. She was originally one of the loudest refusals. One of the 8 who refused to help that first day. Now, she was organizing the heavy lifting teams. She handled food distribution and even invented her own inventory system, using a complex series of knots on a rope. Each knot was an item, its position was the quantity. She created it from nothing. The system had no equivalent. I checked myself. Cheyenne was in charge of roofing. She'd also started quietly training the newer members on her methods. She fixed every error with a patient authority, a duty born from being responsible for our survival. The only thing that changed was the purpose of that quality. 4 years spent in the wrong classroom. I realized I'd been surrounded by people I never truly saw. On the morning of day 7, I gathered my core team, Haeran, Yoonji, Soyeon, Minji, and Cheyenne. We met by the water channel, away from the others and their morning duties. The fire was lit, traps were checked. We had 20 minutes before the first work shift needed orders. I brought up the system map to show them everything. A red marker, north. Its priority rising for 8 days. Unidentified structure. Pre-existing habitation. Age unknown. Access recommended. Priority elevated. The orange markers held their western positions. Patiently. Watching. And there was something new. Something I kept quiet until I was absolutely sure. A blue marker. It appeared 2 nights ago on the eastern coast. The system's note was simple. Signal. Non-natural origin. Haeran froze at my words. Non-natural, she whispered. Something is generating a signal. The system can't identify the source from here, but it's a consistent, rhythmic pulse. Natural things don't pulse like that. It's a transmitter, Soyeon stated. It could be ancient. It could be active. The system can't tell. Silence settled over the group. Only the sound of the water channel filled the air. So, Cheyenne began slowly, her eyes fixed on the sand. Not me. Her tone was different from our first days. Still measured, still precise, but the sharp edge she once had was gone. We have a structure north, here before us, and a presence west, watching us for a week, and in the east, something that could be our way home. Yes, I confirmed, and we've just been building a farm, which we still need. That signal could be a 40-year-old broken machine. The north could be ruins. The west. I stopped, staring at the trees. The west is our most immediate threat. Their decision dictates our freedom on this island. So, what's our first move? Yoonji asked. I stared at the map. 3 markers, 3 great unknowns, 1 camp with 7 days of fragile momentum, and 30 people who had slowly, painfully learned how to work as one. We fortify the southern perimeter today, I declared. The system flagged a weak point in the southeast corner last night. If those orange markers move east, that's their path. We seal that gap first. And then? Soyeon asked. Then Haeran and I head north. Haeran's eyes met mine. She had been expecting this. I could see it in her gaze. The patience of someone who knew these words were coming and was already prepared. Just us? She asked. 3. You, me, and 1 more. My gaze fell on Cheyenne. She looked back at me. I saw a flicker in her expression surprise, or someone recalculating after expecting to be left behind. Why me? She asked. Because besides Haeran, you're the only one who moves without a sound, I said. And if things go wrong, I need someone who thinks fast. A heavy silence followed. When? She said. Tomorrow morning. Before the sun is high. That afternoon, we sealed the southeast perimeter. It took 2 hours and 4 people. The system dictated the precise post spacing needed to close off the approach. Once finished, I walked the entire perimeter, all 4 sides. I checked every joint, testing the bindings on the gate. I studied the western tree line from every angle. The orange markers remained still, but at the gate, staring into the jungle, I saw something new, tied to a tree at the edge of the woods, the same distance from the fence as I was. A strip of woven fiber, dark red, hanging low from a single branch. It wasn't there yesterday. I stared for a long moment. Then I went inside and found Haeran. Red fiber marker. Western tree line, opposite the gate. What does it mean? She left to see for herself, without a word. She returned in 2 minutes. A territorial sign, in most island cultures, she said. But the placement is specific. Directly opposite the open gate, not beside it. And not on the perimeter. It's on their tree line. It marks their boundary, not ours. They're showing us where their land ends. She paused. Which means they've decided where yours begins. I met her eyes. They've accepted the gate, she said simply. They won't cross it, but they aren't telling you to close it, either. Not peace, not an alliance, just an understanding that 2 territories could exist in the same space. They weren't trying to kill each other, for now. For a group that torched our shelter 3 days ago, this was progress. I went back to the gate, my eyes fixed on the red fiber marker against the trees. Later, I checked the fish traps. A deep quiet fell over the camp, different from our first night. This wasn't the silence of fear or exhaustion. It was the silence of a fragile balance. Nothing was solved, but for a moment, we could finally breathe. The fire smoldered low, the water channel flowed, Inside the main hut, you could hear 30 people breathing. I sat at the eastern edge and opened the system map once more. The red marker to the north, steady, patient. The system offered no new data, as if waiting for me to get closer before revealing its secrets. To the west, the orange markers held their position. The red fiber, a truce line, was etched into my mind. And on the eastern coast, the blue marker pulsed with a steady, even rhythm. The system flagged it again. A power source. After 7 days. A sign. I closed the map and stared into the dark jungle. Tomorrow, Heiran, Cheyenne, and I would venture in. The system would only show us so much. The rest was up to us. 3 people in an unknown land, facing whatever was left behind. I listened to the jungle's strange symphony. This island held 3 secrets. We spent a week learning to survive its surface. Now, it was time to see what lay beneath. We left before the others woke. It wasn't a secret, So Yun and Yunji knew, but there was a clarity to the island at dawn. Before the oppressive heat, before the needs of 30 people, movement felt clean, unburdened. Heiran once said, animals are easiest to read at this hour, before the day's chaos begins. I trusted her instincts. The 3 of us met at the northern perimeter at first light. Heiran carried rope, and Yunji's bamboo knife was at her belt. Cheyenne shouldered an empty frame, her expression set with a silent resolve she wouldn't share. And I had the system. In the map's corner, the red marker pulsed, our unwavering objective. As we passed the gate and turned north, I saw the system had updated. A thin line now pointed from our camp to the marker. It followed the contours of the land, avoiding the unstable ground from the rains. This trail wasn't man-made. It was a route calculated from all of Heiran's recon data. How far? Cheyenne asked, her first words of the day. The system says 40 minutes, I replied. The last part is steep. She simply nodded. And then, we moved. The northern jungle was different. Not like the sections Heiran had scouted. The canopy was denser, the undergrowth thinner. This meant less light, but faster travel. The trees here were ancient, their massive roots arching over the ground. The system's path adjusted in real time to Heiran's movements, constantly finding the easiest route forward. At the 20-minute mark, Heiran froze, her hand raised in a silent command. We halted instantly. She crouched low, pointing to our left. I followed her gaze, a line of stones, half swallowed by the forest floor. The arrangement was too deliberate to be natural. Each stone was the same size, with the same spacing. A foundation, she whispered. An old one. The system pulsed. Not with text, but with the red marker in my vision glowing brighter. We were close enough to be detected. Keep moving, I said. We found our target at the 35-minute mark. It was in a clearing where sunlight finally pierced the canopy. But the clearing wasn't natural. The trees at its edge were too uniform, all planted decades ago, now doing their best to imitate a real jungle. In the center of the clearing stood a structure. It wasn't quite ruins. More like a building the jungle was slowly reclaiming as its own. The walls still stood, made of bamboo and hardwood, the same basic design we had used. But this was far older, its fiber bindings gray and brittle. The roof on the eastern side had collapsed. The western end was stable. The system scanned it, updating immediately. Cheyenne stepped beside me, staring at our discovery. This place wasn't always empty. Heron's voice was low. She paced the perimeter, her eyes scanning. She read the earth itself, patient and methodical. Traces of garden beds faced the south. The soil here was worked. The growth was controlled. Someone fought the wilds, until they couldn't, Cheyenne added. Until they couldn't, Heron agreed. I approached the empty doorway. A frame was all that remained. I paused, letting the system scan before I dared to enter. Caution. Eastern section unstable. Western section is stable. Engage standard precautions. Standard. The system's sense of humor was grim. Inside was a single large room. The east end had collapsed, crushing a former sleeping platform with the roof. A raised platform, just like our own Kasarma. The same problem had led them to the exact same solution. Beneath the ruin, vague shapes, containers, tools, a life compressed into layers of rot by time itself. But the western side held strong. A workstation of bamboo and stone stood, built to endure. Above it, a shelf mounted on bent metal brackets held something. I cautiously moved closer. A thick film of dust and mold coated the objects, but they seemed intact. One was a sealed metal container, expertly engineered. Beside it, a piece of oilcloth, folded and stiff with age. And then I saw it. A small, metal device. It had dials on its face and a collapsed antenna. Cables snaked from its back into the wall. I just stared at it, my mind racing. The system confirmed my guess. A shortwave radio, its power source, a solar array on the eastern exterior wall. Array damage detected. Charge cycle. Intermittent. Only intermittent. So that was the blue marker. Not another signal. Just the solar panels on the cabin's eastern wall, catching sunlight through the trees, powering a transmitter that had survived on scraps of energy for years. It blinked on and off, using what little power it gathered. Someone left it on for us. I turned to Heron and Cheyenne. "It's a radio," I said. A heavy silence fell. One word that could change our entire world. Cheyenne slowly entered. She stood beside me, her eyes fixed on the device. Her hand reached out, then hesitated, afraid to touch it. "Does it work?" she whispered. "Barely. The power source is damaged but alive. Can you fix it?" I consulted the system. Diagnostics were already running. It detailed the array damage, the cables, and the transmitter's internal status. Solar array. Only 3 of 7 panels are functional. The rest have physical damage and debris. Cable integrity is intact. Transmitter is functional. Current range: 80 to 120 kilometers. But with a full restoration, 400 to 600 kilometers. 80 kilometers. That could reach a shipping lane. A rescue frequency. Anything. With a full repair, I said. It's 400 to 600 kilometers. Heron let out a sharp breath. "The 3 damaged panels," I murmured, thinking out loud. "It's just physical damage and debris. Yoonji can check the panels. If it's not structural, we have a chance. She can fix anything that isn't snapped in two," Cheyenne declared without hesitation. "Absolutely. She patched our water channel in 10 minutes with just resin and some bamboo. She even fixed Minji's frame when the lashings broke." She paused. "Let her look at it." I met her gaze. "You've been watching her." "I watch everyone," Cheyenne replied simply. No apology in her tone, just a fact. Heron was now focused on the oilcloth package. She glanced at me, asking permission. I nodded. She unfolded it, the aged material cracking at the folds. Time had made it brittle, inflexible. Inside, we found paper, several sheets tucked within. They were folded together, the oilcloth preserving the ink. Handwriting. Most of it was in Korean. Some parts were English, technical notes. Heron scanned it quietly. And then, she froze. "What is it?" I asked. She looked up at me with that very specific expression. She'd found something vital in the jungle, and needed the right words to describe it. "It's a logbook," she finally said. "A record." She turned to the first page. "It starts, but I can only read some of it. The ink has faded in places. It begins with an arrival. A research team. It says, Botanical Survey. 3 people. I asked, when? She angled the fragile paper towards the light. The date. The date is faded. From the 1990s. Perhaps. The paper itself feels ancient. What else? She read in silence, her gaze moving over the pages. Her expression tightened, a shadow forming in her eyes. They were on a survey, she explained, but they found something that was never on any map. The author calls it. She hesitated, reading the line again. The author calls it a living structure, underground, below the northern ridge. She looked up at us. They never reported it to their organization. The log doesn't explain why. Only that they concealed it. And then? Cheyenne asked. She leaned in close, looking over Heron's shoulder at the log. Most of the team left. 2 of them. Heron paused, her finger on one particular page. The writer stayed behind, alone, to continue watching it. The clearing was still. Only insects buzzed. Wind whispered through the trees. The jungle had been reclaiming this place for decades. And there, the log ends, Heron said. She gently closed the oilcloth cover. The 3 of us stood in the dim light of a clearing that was once maintained, then abruptly abandoned. A radio sat on the shelf. The east wall was collapsed. Wild garden beds were visible through the door. We take the log, I said, and we get Yoonji to check these solar panels. And the structure underground? Cheyenne asked. I glanced at the building's northern wall. The system had offered nothing on that question. No data, no markers in that direction past the red dot where we stood. The system only shows what it can perceive. Whatever was under that northern ridge, it was blind to it. The system has flagged this location for 7 days, I said. It hasn't marked anything north of us, which means there's either nothing there to find, or, Heron said, whatever is there is invisible to the system's sensors. A tense silence followed. When do we go? Cheyenne asked. Not if, when. My gaze fell to the log in Heron's hands, to the radio, to the ruin of the building's wall, where someone had stayed alone for years, watching something they refused to report. Not today, I said. Today, we find Yoonji, we fix the panels, and we try the radio. One problem at a time. And if the radio works? Heron asked. I considered it. What it would mean. A signal reaching a ship, a station, a tower. It could mean rescue. The end of our time on this island. The camp dismantled. 30 people sent back. Returned to a world that never truly had a place for me. The end of the only 2 weeks in 4 years I felt needed. Then we go home, I said. My voice was completely level. I was proud of that. We left the building almost as we found it. I took the sealed metal case inside the carrier. Heron held the log, wrapped in its oilcloth. The radio stayed, charging from 3 solar panels, waiting for Yoonji. On the walk back, Cheyenne finally voiced the thought she'd been holding for 40 minutes. You already knew the system couldn't see what's under that ridge. It doesn't mark blind spots. It just goes silent. And you noticed the silence. Yes. She walked on for a moment. What do you think is there? I don't know, but you think it's something. A researcher stayed alone here for years watching it, I said. I think they built this shelter, left a radio on, and wrote a journal that has no proper ending. And I think the system I've used for 7 days, the one that mapped every plant and stream on this island, has 0 data for the area an hour north of us. Cheyenne was quiet. So, yes, I said. I think something is definitely there. The camp emerged from the trees, the pale line of its fence, a thin column of smoke from the fire, the quiet sounds of 30 people in a routine that didn't exist 8 days ago. We walked back inside the gate. Yoonji was in the crafting area. She looked up as we entered. I put the frame down and told her everything. She listened with no expression, until I mentioned the solar panels, 3 intact, 4 of them damaged. Debris damage, mostly. Cable integrity unknown. She followed up with 2 questions, both technical, specific, the kind someone asks when they're already solving the problem. When do we go? She said. This afternoon, I told her, while there's still light. She put down her work and immediately began selecting tools. Yoonji stared at the solar panels for 4 minutes without touching a thing. This was her process. I'd seen it enough to know. She understood the problem fully before acting, just like Heron reads the land before she moves. For minutes, there was only stillness. Her eyes moved over the array, tracing connections, cataloging every bit of damage. Then, she reached out, touching the broken panel with 2 fingers. I tested the adhesion, seeing if it was peeling or just caked in grime. 2 of the 4 panels could be salvaged, she confirmed. Surface scrapes, debris, 1 cracked mount. For the other 2, she tapped them lightly. A deep fracture through the cells. Those are gone. That leaves us 5 functional panels total, I calculated. If I can repair the bracket and clean them off, yes, 5 out of 7. The system's calculation was clear. 5 panels, giving us enough power for a constant, low-energy broadcast. Its range was 200 to 280 kilometers, not the 4 to 600 needed for a relay, but 280 could reach a shipping lane, a Coast Guard patrol, a science vessel, something. How long would it take? I asked her. The bracket's the problem. I need strong metal, not something brittle. Her eyes scanned the ruined structure, then the wreckage of the east wing. There's material right here. Give me 2 hours. Cheyenne was already at the debris pile, moving slabs, taking stock of what lay beneath. Heron handled the exterior, patiently scraping a decade of filth from the panel surfaces. I sat with the log. In the light from the doorway, I could decipher more than Heron had on the march north. Her summary was accurate. A research team, a botanical survey, 3 people, who arrived in the 90s. But I focused on sections she'd skimmed over. A name appeared in the margin. Park something. The family name was clear, but the first was ruined by water damage. A researcher. The log's first entries were professional. Cataloging species, sampling soil, observing weather, just standard fieldwork notes. Then, on day 11 of the survey, the tone shifted. Found an entrance today. It's not natural. The geometry is all wrong. A rectangle, about 1.2 meters wide, built into the ridge. It looked ancient. Definitely not recent. I showed the team. We agreed to keep it off the official record until we knew more. Jay wanted to report it immediately. I refused. S was silent, as always. I kept reading. The next log was 3 days later. J and S left on schedule. I told them I was extending my survey period. They bought the official excuse. But the entrance is the real reason. I can't leave until I know what it is. The structure inside is artificial. I've been in twice. The air feels different. Not stale or fresh. It's moving. Circulating from some hidden source I can't find. The system. I froze. I read the word again. The system gave me the first reading on day 4. I thought it was an equipment error at first. But the pattern holds. It seems to react when I get near the entrance. I looked up from the log. Across the room, Cheyenne's eyes were fixed on me. She saw the look on my face. What is it? She asked. I stared back at the log, rereading the line. And then the next one. I don't know its origin. It just appeared. A transparent overlay in my vision on the morning of day 4. I have told no one. I began to question my sanity, thinking it was some neurological damage. But every test has proven it correct. It shows me what this island possesses, what can be created from the materials here, what is safe, and what is deadly. It feels tied to this island, or something beneath it. The entry stopped. The next page was gone, ripped from the spine, leaving only torn edges. The log began again, months later, with altered handwriting, smaller, tighter, the pen pressed deep into the paper. I have entered the structure 17 times now. I understand maybe 5% of what I am seeing. The system helps, but it offers no translation for what's down there. It goes silent the moment I step inside. Whatever it is, it existed before the system, or it is the system's true source. I cannot be sure which. I carefully closed the log. I sat for a moment, listening to the jungle. The system appeared for the researcher on day 4. It had appeared on day 1 for me. His system went dead at the entrance of the underground structure. Mine had no data beyond this clearing. The same system, or at least the same type, tied to this island, or to what's beneath it. Yunji fixed the bracket in 90 minutes, meaning she found better metal than expected. A piece of the structure's original frame, half buried in debris, but still strong enough to work with. She bent it over a small fire Cheyenne made, fitting it to the mount with a precision that took 3 attempts and absolute silence from us all. When she finally seated the last panel, the system updated instantly. Solar array, 5 of 7 panels functional, current charge level, 34%. The estimate was 4 hours to transmission, 4 hours, we'd lose daylight. We'll return tomorrow, I said. I'll stay, Yunji declared. My eyes shot to her. Someone has to be here at the threshold, she explained, to try contact before we lose the solar charge. She scanned the building. The west side is solid. I've checked the roof. It will stand through the night. Alone? This isn't my first time. Her tone was flat, just like always. Leave the rope and the knife. I'll be fine. Cheyenne started to object, but then stopped. She looked from Yunji to me. She's right, Cheyenne admitted. Someone has to be here, and only she can troubleshoot the panels if something goes wrong. I looked back at Yunji. She was already next to the transmitter, studying the dials, learning its systems, like she was born for it. Utterly focused. The frequency, I told her. System flags distress at 2182 kHz. Secondary is 156.8 MHz. Try both. She memorized them instantly, filed the info away. Go, she said. I'll signal if something happens. I know the pattern. We left her in that clearing, radio charging, with the jungle closing in, showing the same sharp efficiency she applied to all things. On the way back, it hit me that 3 weeks ago, Yunji was just a girl in my class, and now she was alone in a 30-year-old ruin, running a comms op with the calm of a veteran. This island had forged her. Or maybe, it simply gave us the stage to become who we really were. Back at camp, I gathered everyone at the Kasarma post-dinner, all of them this time, not just my inner circle, 30 people. They deserved to know. I told them of the structure, the radio, the panels, the 4-hour charge, and Yunji, alone in the dark, the log, the science team, the writer who stayed, the system's notes. I didn't mention the underground entrance yet. It wasn't about keeping secrets. It's because the order of information matters. The radio came first. The chance of rescue had to come first. Everything else would follow. The reaction was predictable. Hope hit some like a flood after a drought, a visible release. A week of crushing tension finally started to snap. Yuna covered her mouth in shock. 2 girls in the back grabbed each other. Others fell silent in a far more complex way I recognized. I didn't voice it. We had built a world from nothing, and now we might have to leave it. That strange feeling of a door opening back to a world that had cast you aside before the storm ever hit. So-Yun asked the key question. If Yunji makes contact, what's our timeline? Depends who she reaches and where they deploy from. Best case, 48 hours. Worst case, they need our location, an extraction plan, and a good weather window. Could be a week. We keep building, So-Yun said, sharp and without hesitation. Until boots are on this beach, we keep working. The farm, the traps, the walls. Nothing stops. Nods went around the circle, even from Yuna. Cheyenne remained quiet during the meeting, sitting slightly apart. She was watching everyone's faces with the same piercing attention she'd used for the past week. When the meeting ended, I walked by her. The log, she said softly. I stopped dead. The part you left out, she stated. It was not a question. I sat down beside her. I took out the log and found the entries. I read them to her quietly, the fire behind us as the camp settled for the night. When I was done, she stayed quiet a long time. The same system, she breathed. That researcher had it too. Something like it. The description is a match. And his system died at the entrance to whatever's down there. Yes. She gazed toward the northern tree line. A wall of blackness beyond our perimeter. You're going down there, she said. Not until we know about the radio. If Yunji gets a signal, rescue is the mission. Everything else waits. And if she doesn't get anyone, I hesitated for a moment. Then we go north, I said, and we find out what's really down there. I took the watch rotations myself that night. The full perimeter, every hour. The orange markers on my system map were frozen, just as they'd been for 3 days. The western red fiber line was invisible, but I knew it was there. At midnight, the system pinged with a notification I had never seen before. It wasn't a map marker, not a craft alert. A single line of text appeared, glowing steadily, not pulsing. Subsurface activity detected. Northern ridge. Depth unknown. Pattern. Non-geological. Non-geological. I just stood at the edge of the perimeter, staring into the oppressive dark for a very long time. I returned to the fire, waiting for morning to break. The signal came at 9 a.m. Yunji's whistle. 3 short, 2 long. It sliced through the jungle, hitting everyone in camp at once. Her pattern was clear. Contact had been made. We moved. The camp scrambled towards the northern clearing. Well, most of us. Soyeon held the perimeter. Yunji was at the radio, handset pressed to her ear. She raised a hand as we arrived, silencing us. She spoke into the handset, giving coordinates. The system's coordinates, a contingency I gave her that morning. She listened, then spoke again. Lowering the handset, she faced us. Maritime Rescue Relay, she said. Out of Jeju. They're logging our position. They need 6 hours for a coordinate fix before sending an extraction vessel. The clearing exploded with noise. I backed away from the group, letting the sound wash over me. 30 people chanting the word home. I stood at the jungle's edge. 6 hours until confirmation. A minimum of 48 hours until extraction. The island still had 48 hours to show me its secrets. The system pulsed in my vision. The red marker was steady. Below it, new text appeared. Subsurface activity escalating. Source: 340 meters north-northwest. Recommend immediate investigation. Escalating. I saw the people who might be home in 2 days. Then I looked north. I found Heiran and Cheyenne, away from the celebrating crowd. 3 words: we go now. Heiran read my face and turned north, asking no questions about the new urgency. Cheyenne glanced at the celebration behind us, then at me, and she followed. She no longer needed an explanation before acting. That change was forged somewhere on the perimeter. I hadn't marked the moment, but I was thankful now. As we moved, Soyeon caught my eye across the clearing. I held up 3 fingers. 3 of us. Going north. She looked to the tree line, then back to me, and gave a sharp nod. She would hold the camp. She always did. We passed the northern gap and entered the deep jungle. This time, the system's path was different. It wasn't the route to the structure. This one veered northwest after 20 minutes. We climbed towards the ridge as the terrain grew steeper. The system marked every safe footfall, guiding us over stable ground. I relayed its guidance as we moved. Heiran adjusted our path, while Cheyenne followed with a silence she'd mastered over the week. At the 25-minute mark, the ground shifted beneath us. Not a big change, just a new texture underfoot, a hollow echo at certain spots, like walking over a hidden ruin. Heiran stopped, pressing her foot down. It's thin here, she said. The topsoil. There's space underneath. How wide? She paced a slow arc. Testing. Large. Very large. The system confirmed it. Subsurface cavity. Estimated size. At least 40 by 60 meters. 8 to 12 meters deep. A single access point 30 meters ahead. I gave them the numbers. Heiran scanned the ground with renewed focus. Cheyenne looked up. The trees here were younger, not like the ancient jungle. Second, growth. The same pattern we saw around the structure. This place had been managed by someone. We pressed forward. The entrance was exactly where the system said. Not a natural cave, but something carved into the ridge. A stone-lined rectangle, 1.2 meters wide by 1.8 high. It matched the log entry perfectly. The stones were fit without mortar, so tight that decades of growth hadn't breached them. This was old, patient work. Above the doorway, carved at eye level, was a symbol. Not Korean, not any alphabet I'd ever seen. It was geometric concentric rings, cut by a single vertical line. The system scanned it. Got her. But found nothing. No match. No category. It went quiet. This was a different kind of silence. A dead zone. Like watching your signal bars drop to nothing. The interface was still there, but all its data panels were empty, just gray, waiting for data it couldn't find. I stood at the threshold, staring into the dark. The system stops here? Heiran asked. Goes quiet. Same as the log described. That should concern us, Cheyenne stated. It does, I said. We go in anyway. She looked at me. Because the system's silence here is more interesting than anything it's shown us. Yes, that's either very smart or very stupid. History will decide, I said, and stepped inside. The passage ran straight for 15 meters, the flawless stonework continuing all the way through. This wasn't a natural cave. The walls were too perfect. The arch of the ceiling, intentional, man-made, built by someone with immense patience, and a purpose I couldn't yet see. The air was just as the log described, not stale, but not fresh either. It was moving. A deep circulation kept the temperature mild, cool, but not cold, dry, but not arid. Whatever was down here had been breathing for ages. At the passage's end, Stone steps led down into an expanding darkness. Heyran shouldered the rope. She secured it to the wall before we went down. Cheyenne then revealed a torch, made in secret from a coal she'd saved from our fire. Of course she had. She'd been ready since I first mentioned the log. The torch flame touched the bottom and illuminated a vast space. The chamber was enormous, not like a natural cavern with dramatic ceilings or impossible crystals. Its size was quieter, more deliberate. This was a workshop, an ancient, massive workshop. The stone floor was perfectly level. Its seams were still flush, even after what must have been centuries. The walls vaulted into darkness the torch couldn't pierce. Along them, at perfect intervals, were stone shelves, not natural ledges. They were carved, smoothed, uniform. And on them, containers, dozens of them, sealed with a strange material, not metal or clay, that had defied the ages without decay. Each one was palm-sized, cylindrical, and perfectly sealed. In the center of the room, a structure stood alone. Not furniture, not a machine, of something else. A low platform, polished to a mirror shine, with a basin at its center. A perfect circle, about 30 centimeters across, carved to a precise depth. Around its rim was the same symbol from the entrance. I approached the platform, staring into the basin. The system pulsed. This wasn't a notification. This was something else entirely. My entire interface flickered. Every tab, all my data, flashed for a single instant, then returned to normal. As if it recognized this place. Did something just happen? Cheyenne asked. She had seen it on my face. The system reacted, I said. For the first time. Heyran was by the shelves, studying the containers. They're labeled, she called out. Same symbols as the entrance. I can't read it, but they're organized, grouped, with different secondary marks. Cataloged, I muttered. Very carefully, she added. A long, long time ago. I stared at the platform, at the basin, at the symbol the system couldn't label, but definitely recognized. The researcher came here 17 times, understood maybe 5%, and stayed here for years, telling no one. What kind of secret makes a man abandon the entire world? I reached out and placed my hand flat on the cold stone. The system roared to life. Full signal. Every panel active, but displaying things I had never seen before. Not recipes. Not maps. New tabs appeared in rapid succession, labeled in that same ancient script. Untranslated. Unreadable. But they were there. Then, one tab. Different from the rest. Its label appeared in clear text. The only translated word. Archive. Access level. Initial. I could only stare. What's happening? Cheyenne whispered. She was beside me, seeing my shock. The system. It just got bigger, I said. A weak description. But it was the truth. There are new tabs. I can't read most of them. But one. What does it say? Archive. Initial access. Silence filled the vast chamber. The torch flame flickered in the unseen air. Far above us, 30 people were celebrating their rescue, planning their trip home. Open it, Heyran said, her voice firm. She stared at the empty air where she knew my screen was. I opened the tab. What loaded wasn't text. It was a map. Not my surface map, though the island was there, rendered in perfect detail from the last 8 days. This map went deeper, below the surface. It showed caves, tunnels, and even this very chamber. And beyond us, deeper still, a network of connected spaces my map had never shown. The deepest point was marked with a symbol I recognized, but not from the carvings. It was from the system itself. The same marker it used for its highest priority targets. Red. Not the alert red of a surface warning. Deeper. A different red. The kind of color that spoke of something ancient and aware, waiting patiently for someone to arrive. Below the symbol was a single translated line, the only understandable text in the entire archive. Origin point. Status. Dormant. Condition. Stable. Awaiting reactivation. I read it 3 times. Then, closing the tab, I faced Heyran and Cheyenne in the torchlight. The system, I said slowly. Whatever it is. It was given to that researcher 30 years ago, and to me, 8 days ago. I paused. It came from here, from something far below this chamber. And whatever that something is, it's still down there. And it has been waiting. The torch crackled. The air flowed through the chamber, steady and patient. Cheyenne stared at the platform. At the depression in its center. Her gaze followed the new passages leading north, just revealed by the map. The rescue team arrives in 48 hours, she said. Yes, 48 hours, I confirmed. She met my eyes. For the first time since the beach, since she left me alone with the system that first day, there was no calculation in her gaze. No assessment of risk or personal cost, just the same pull I was feeling. The call of something that had waited long enough. We returned to the surface and walked south in silence. The sounds of camp reached us before we saw the perimeter. Voices. Running water. The noise of a place that was alive. I stared at the map as we walked. The new archive tab sat in my interface, its untranslated labels a silent, patient presence. The deep red marker pulsed every few seconds, steady, unhurried, awaiting reactivation. The island gave me a system that kept 30 people alive. That system led me to a researcher who had been alone for years. That structure led to this chamber, which expanded the system, and showed me something deeper, something too ancient for any known language. Something that generated the same system in a researcher 30 years ago, and in me on a beach 8 days ago, and had likely been doing so for much, much longer than that. 48 hours until rescue, one passage leading north and down. I stepped through the perimeter gate into our camp. So-yeon was at the water channel, her eyes locked onto mine. "You found something," she stated. "Yes, something that changes things?" I thought about it. About the chamber, the archive, and that pulsing marker, and that single translated line on a map that went deeper than I ever knew. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but we need to talk, all of us, tonight." She glanced toward the northern tree line. "I'll get everyone together," she said decisively.